dealing with the Srimad Bhagavatam, the age of Kali, Maharaj Pariksit, and the what is up and what is down here in the age of Kali, we discovered why gold is so valuable in this age, because Maharaj Pariksit, after he was going to punish Kali, but then Kali surrendered to him, took off the crown that he was wearing as a false king, and bowed down before Maharaj Pariksit. And in the code of the ancient warriors, you could not slay an enemy that has surrendered to you. So Kali then asked for, if he was going to be allowed to live, he needed some place to stay. So he was given several places where he could live. One was the casino or gambling house. One was the place where liquor is sold. Another was the brothel. And the last one was the slaughterhouse. So at that time, none of these things were very current in the world. There weren't bars and slaughterhouses, and so Kali asked for one place where he could reside, and Maharaj Pariksit told him that he could reside in gold, because with gold you could get all the different sinful activities that people want to perform, such as gambling, intoxication, meat eating, and illicit sex. So at that point, Kali became gold standardized, and that is why there's such a frenzy for gold and why gold has become so valuable in the modern age. People can buy and purchase the different forms of sense gratification with that. But also gold has a positive use. Maharaj Pariksit revealed that if the accumulated wealth of people would be used for the upliftment of mankind, for different discussions about ancient scripture, for the vibration of the holy names of the Lord, for the feeding of the poor, then this tendency would be decreased in gold, that it would only be used for sinful purposes. But in this age, we have to make a conscious effort to use our wealth and our whatever wealth and power and prestige that we have for the good of mankind, for feeding others, for helping others, for the upliftment of man. Otherwise, the tendency is for that gold to be used in a degraded way and to lower our consciousness. The nature of man is that we are jivatma, or spirit soul, and that the soul resides in the body, in the heart. This is very much a simplified example would be the car and driver, that the car is the body, and the driver is the spiritual particle, or the spirit soul, which is actually transcendental to material circumstances. That spirit soul has a different nature from the material elements. It is actually a transcendental particle, and in its ultimate state, it is free from all the inebrities of death, ignorance, anxiety. But through identification, through the mind, it has become identified with the body, and this is why we feel so much anxiety, and we're very much caught up in the pains and pleasures of this world, but actually we're separate from that. So just like the car cannot move without a driver, so in the same way, our body, when it's without the driver, it's called dead. But also, just like with the car example, that in general, when they can no longer use their car or their vehicle because it's become worn out or damaged in some way, they get another car. It's not that their existence as a driver is over. They'll move on to another realm and get another vehicle to perform activities with. So in the same way, once this body becomes old and worn out or becomes too damaged to function anymore, that the soul, the jivatma, the spiritual particle, it goes on and it lives through, it receives another body or another vehicle to perform its activities in. The only question is, at the time of death, have we gained enough spiritual knowledge and spiritual perfection in order to get a spiritual body to reside in the spiritual kingdom, which is a different concept than heaven. But anyway, in the spiritual kingdom, which is our original place of residence, there's full knowledge, full bliss, full eternity. It goes on with no death, no anxieties, or is our consciousness degraded into material life so that we will have to take another material body and suffer in the cycle of birth and death repeatedly? So the human form of life is very important because we can either become elevated to the highest perfection or we can stay rotating within the material world. Another thing that we learned in our previous talks is that the ancient Vedic knowledge is being used against people nowadays and as a control mechanism. For example, let me explain how this has happened. Mostly in our current societies, it's happened through the Nazi lineage, in the sense that the Nazis were created from the Thule Society, or the Thule Society, which is very much obsessed with ancient occult knowledge and ancient writings, ancient teachings of the past. This society later became the foundations of the Nazi Party. So they were very much interested in, especially through Max Muller, that at the time the German scholars were the only ones, besides the people in India, who could really translate and understand the ancient scriptures, because they were the topmost Indoologists of that era. So through Max Muller, his revelations and discoveries of the ancient Vedic knowledge, this became a great part of the Nazi obsession. Unfortunately, the Nazis took it in a perverted way. For example, the concept of the Aryan is coming from the ancient Vedic knowledge, but the concept of the Aryan in the past meant a person of high standing, who was on a path of spiritual enlightenment, who was righteous, who could help others. It had nothing to do with any particular race or creed or color. It was anyone of any part of the world, of any race, of any creed, of any color, that was on a path of progressive enlightenment. It had nothing to do with a particular bloodline. So unfortunately, the Nazis perverted this idea of the Aryan into specific bloodlines, and that certain bloodlines were more than other bloodlines. And this is a complete perversion of the concept. Also, another ways that the ancient knowledge was perverted by the Nazis as they were discovering all this information is that they became obsessed with the technological aspects of the ancient cultures. Because in the past, under the perfect societies, we see there's often a question of how could they have created these ancient monolithic structures, and everything is so precisely put together, and how could they do pyramids, and everything is down to the thousandth of an inch as far as the tolerances of the different stones being put together. So the Nazis were obsessed with the different technology, the high technologies of the past, which is how these things were done. For example, in the Vedas, there's discussion of the Vimanas, which were the flying machines. And there are all kinds of technologies of the past that are discussed in the Vedas, including flying machines that could go into outer space, rockets, nuclear energy, electricity, atomic power. And the Nazis, unfortunately, rather than focusing on the true meaning of the Vedas, which was for enlightenment, self-realization, peace, and prosperity, they focused on these aspects of technology, which is how they got the idea for the jet-propelled airplane, nuclear energy, rocketry. Anyway, so this was their idea, that they were focusing on the wrong part. Then, at the end of World War II, through Operation Paperclip, the great top Nazi scientists, thinkers, propagandists, genetic researchers, they were split between the Soviets and the Americans. Also, there was Nazi specialists that had learned from the ancient Vedic knowledge about how important sound vibration and visual images were to the upliftment of mankind. But in a reverse-engineered kind of way, they were using these things as to the detriment of mankind. They understood the importance of symbols, the importance of visual images, the importance of sound vibration through music and speeches to control the minds of the masses. They also got their ideas for genetic experimentation and other things through a perverted understanding of the Vedas. So when they came over to America and the Soviet Union, they basically infiltrated every aspect of our governments, and every arm and branch of our government became obsessed with the Nazi ideals of, for example, conquering space, which I think by now everyone knows that Wernher von Braun, who was actually a Nazi war criminal because he used slave labor in the construction of the V-2 rocket, but he was embraced to come to America, to become the father of NASA, to become the father of American rocketry. And this was happening in all different other fields and studies, in genetics, in media manipulation. So The obsessions and the misunderstandings of the Nazis became the obsessions and the misunderstandings of the American and Soviet governments. Their main focus became, rather than uplifting people through ancient knowledge, through ancient study, through discussion of higher purposes, rather they became obsessed with the conquest of space, creating uber weapons, such as nuclear weapons and neutron bombs and so many other types of weaponry, keeping the mass of people in a slave-like condition through the use of television and different vibrations and images to control the minds of the people to keep them from higher knowledge. This also relates to secret societies. There's a lot of discussion nowadays about secret societies and what's their purpose and meaning. Basically, secret societies formed when they understood that we were into the age of Kali and that the main current of this age was different than the past ages, which were full of righteousness and purity, that the main current of this age would be degradation and violence, criminality, lawlessness, so that people wouldn't be very much interested in spiritual enlightenment. The secret societies then sequestered the ancient knowledge, or they tried to sequester it, unto themselves, to be used as a weapon in a reverse-engineered sense against the mass of people, that they would keep the ancient knowledge, they would derive the benefits from it, and since in this age the current was that most people wouldn't care anyway, that they had a right to use that knowledge against the people, while they were taking the parts that were beneficial for themselves, the parts which previously were for all mankind, and that everyone was studying the ancient knowledge for the benefit. They would keep that ancient knowledge for themselves, and they would use it in a reverse-engineered sense against the mass of people to do their bidding, to keep them enslaved for their own sense pleasure, so that they could amass great wealth, great prosperity, enjoy all the finest material items that this world had to offer, whereas they would get the ordinary mass of people to work for them, whether knowingly or unknowingly, and kind of even now we still do this in our modern society. We work for them, but there's more of a, in the past they would do outright slavery and manipulation and forcing people to do their will. Now through the use of television, radio, sound vibration, visual images, media manipulation, governmental manipulation, people are under the thought that they're free, which I forget which ancient, or in the past someone had said that it's very difficult to free slaves if they're under the illusion that they're already free. So this is what they kind of the impression that they give us nowadays. We actually have golden shackles in that they give us just enough bread and circuses, just enough food, enough entertainment, enough visual stimulation, just enough so-called freedom to not realize that there are master manipulators and elitist manipulators behind the scene that are actually drawing energy from us and using our energy for their purposes. So this is the gist of the ancient secret societies, is that they feel like they have the right to use ancient knowledge against the people because they've understood the current of this age of Kali. And rather than trying to fight against it and to open up the vast storehouse of ancient knowledge for the benefit of mankind, they've decided that they're going to use it against mankind in a reverse engineered, because after all, that most people aren't interested anyway, and we're just getting what we deserve. We also learned in the previous chapter that animals have souls, and that we have all the similar points in common with animals, that we eat, they eat. We sleep, they sleep. We mate, they mate. We defend, they defend. There are systems of communications. So with all the points of similar in common, that there's no justification to try to explain away the soul of the animal.